talking about the concept of vision today, and vision versus being a victim. Many of us, in terms of the families, I think sometimes we might feel like victims, like we don't have control, might be kind of hopeless, working with a loved one that just hasn't seen through to get to some peace and serenity in their lives yet. And so our lives become attached to their lives by trying to fix their lives, and we kind of lose our sense of peace and serenity. And so the reverse of that is, instead of being a victim of the loved one or the addict, is to have a vision for that loved one. So let's talk about a couple principles here. So usually, from what I understand as being in with my clients that struggle with addiction, is a lot of their issue starts with early bonding. And that is their ability to attach to their loved one, to their primary caregiver. And so there's a breakdown. There's a breakdown of trust and vulnerability, and then they connect and try to bond with non-relational substances. So let's see if we can kind of replay this back or flip the script, really, is what we want to do with the concept of vision. So vision is, let me define it this way. I mean, vision obviously is what you see and what you see from afar. But let's kind of bring that home a little bit. Vision is what I want you to experience when you are with me. But now, here's the problem, is that just doesn't start with the loved one in terms of the addict. It actually starts in the home and then filters through to our loved ones. And so let's talk about home for a minute. So they're basic, what I call subsystems that we deal with. One is the executive subsystem. That executive subsystem is mom and dad. Mom and dad will set the tone. So in your executive subsystem, what you want to do is have a vision for your partner, a vision for your marriage. What does that look like? Let's just kind of throw a couple things out there. One of the key issues that we deal with is there's not a unity between mom and dad. And what that looks is, mom may be keeping secrets from dad about son or daughter's behavior. And all of a sudden the son or daughter realizes, hey, I've got actually much more power than a child now. I have more power over dad. I have actually more power over mom. I'm entitled. I can do whatever I want. That's because of a breakdown in the parental subsystem. So let's work on that. Let's work on the concept of when I'm with my spouse, what I want that spouse to experience is unity. Unity, no secrets, no shadows between us. We are one and the same. We present a united front of love to that loved one. If we were just to do that, I think we'd go really far in amending problems with our loved ones, our children.
Yeah, all the times we see one parent on board really setting boundaries, another parent wanting to help their child so much, but unfortunately there's this internal conflict going on without turning and leaning into each other. I mean, I know the divorce rate of adults with addict children are on a rise too, because typically we tend to pull away versus really leaning into each other, having that open communication and dialogue, forming that unity to make sure that, hey, we are a united front, we love you unconditionally. It's the behavior that we're looking to change, and here's what mom and dad have gone through and the stance that we're taking and how we're able to help really with that uncomfortable confrontation, if you will.
Right, and that brings up another point then, thanks for mentioning that, is, okay, so let's say you're a single parent. Let's say you are the single parent, and which many of us are, and there's a struggle there because the other half is gone, the other half is not there, and so this is the problem, is when I now look at my son or daughter as my friend. Now you would think, now what's wrong with that? Well, what's wrong with that is it only becomes a problem if you're now not setting limits and consequences for the child, and therefore you're teaching them, you're setting a vision for them of your responsibility. And we don't want to do that. So what we want to do is maintain our system of the executive system, meaning that if I've heard one therapist say that if your kids aren't hating you at least once a day, you're not doing your job, because it's really okay. And why do they hate you? Because you're saying no, and that's what they don't like to hear. So there's that side too. So that's a real valid point.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up too. What popped in my mind, I think of the Garden of Eden as the ultimate example of you can do what you want, when you want, how you want, whatever you want. There's only one rule. And as human beings, we even messed that up. And so how that gives an example of we expect pushback, we expect challenging. I know a lot of times parents will say, okay, we set the boundary or we talked, we are united. However, there's so much pushback, what do we do? When I go in with the expectation, I expect pushback. It's human nature for a child, a loved one, an adult child to push back, to do whatever it takes to resist. And so to not take that personally, to not say, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me or what's wrong with my child, to say, oh, this is behavior that is par for the course. We are expecting this, that is okay, this is still a decision, and then here's the consequence if we choose to blow through that boundary, and here's the reward if we choose to keep it.
Right, that's very true. And it's staying along the line now, the single parent. To be real frank with you, to be a single parent is tiring. And with that resistance, constant resistance, sometimes 24/7, let's not minimize that. It wears on your emotions, it wears on your will. And so here's what we do with that. You don't do it alone. You have to have your support system of friends that you can call and say, hey, look, my son or daughter just did this. I have to say this. I don't want to say this. I don't want to do that. And then you get support. And then you go ahead and have a conversation with the son or daughter. And then you call the friend back. This is what I did. This is what happened. The friend says, you know what? Stand strong. You did the right thing. Because we need that support. And to try to do single parenting on your own is very exhausting and will really drain you. So don't do that. Don't do that. Let's go back to when the couple is still together. So we have the vision for, I want you to experience unity. I also want you to experience transparency. Because what happens is the addict will use the shadows to step in and split parents and then be manipulative and to keep you apart so that there's no togetherness. So transparency means no shadows. No shadows, no secrets. And then the other part is safety. I want you to experience as my marital partner safety, emotional safety with me, which means I'm going to be here to hear what you have to say without judging, criticizing. I want to hear you. I want to hear your heart. And when you share your heart, I want to be there to let you know you understood. So now when that happens, your system as parents gets stronger and stronger. And then your child will see that and say, wait a minute, this isn't what it used to be. This is now something different, and I like it. Because now what you have in terms of vision for the child will be more solid. And we'll get into that in a minute.
Yeah, I love the idea of moving from victimization to visualization and looking at, okay, what does this ideal relationship look like? Now, on the opposite end of that, we have to understand the whole ideal is something to set goals, to get closer to. The ideal is never achievable. So if we go in with expectations of, okay, here's the ideal, and if we don't meet that, we're frustrated. One of the greatest analogies I've heard is this: it's like the horizon. No matter how far you keep going in a plane, you never reach the horizon. But we don't get depressed or sad if we go, I didn't meet the horizon today, we kept flying. And that really resonates with me because so many times we tend to use the ideal as a measurement tool instead of as a goal or what we're working towards, knowing that, hey, I'm not going to hit this. It's the ideal. However, this is what this could potentially look like. Let's start on these simple action steps to get closer to that as opposed to using that as the measuring stick.
Right. No, I like that. So we talked about unity, we talked about transparency, we talked about safety, and the other one that's really important is boundaries. So I want you to experience responsibility in relationship with me as a spouse. So if behavior comes up that is hurtful or harmful, even worse, I have to have the ability to say, no, that doesn't work for me. And to say, to share from a responsible position that made me feel, I felt very hurt, very wounded, very ignored, whatever. Please don't do that again. And if you do, then I'm going to have to step out of the room until you're ready to treat me in a different manner. So once you have that, then when you get on the phone with your loved one that is struggling with their addiction, you will be able to hold your limits and set your consequences. No, actually, you can't talk to me that way. No, I'm not going to send you a brand new iPhone X because that's beyond my budget. And by the way, you don't actually need that. That's probably not even in your best interest right now. But those boundaries get set first with the executive system and then towards the child. And so those are three things, those are the four things. So unity, transparency, safety, and boundaries. That's a great way to start your vision for your marriage, and it'll make it stronger.
Yeah, and then I'll throw in the two C's from that. First C is clarity. As we start to write down, we put pen to paper, the mind will start to create what it is we're looking for. And then if we get hung up, we can call friends, talk with other people, but to really gain clarity of what that looks like and put it on paper. I know so many times people intellectualize and go, oh yeah, that's great, I do that in my head. And it's kind of like, well, let's put it on paper. Let's actually create to get absolute clarity of what that looks like. And then the second C is commitment. And then commitment of what steps will we take daily as a family, as husband and wife, or even we work with a lot of divorced families as well as coming together for a phone call to say what's in the best interest for the family, for the individual that is here. And so once we get that clarity, then we can move to the commitment. And by using those two, we're able to address all four to really build that vision.
That's good. So that then moves to the other part of this is, what vision do I have for my loved one, for my child? What vision do I have for them? And I direct you to a book called The Blessing by Gary Smalley, and he has some acronyms there about how to bless. So I'll just read them off. To be committed, loving touch, loving safe touch, expressing value, seeing potential, and saying it. So let's go to, this is what I want to put across today is, what is your vision for your child? What is your vision for your son, for your daughter? We all have hopes. A lot of us, it's not clear. We don't have the clarity. So I'm going to suggest that maybe you sit down and write a letter. Sit down and write a letter to your loved one that says, this is what I see for you. These are the strengths that I see in your life. So we're going to leave the place of judgment and we're going to step in the place of vision. And if you put it in writing, how will you really feel towards your son or daughter in terms of your heart? What do you really see for their life, for their success? Because your job is basically to launch them. So you want to launch them into the greatest success, to be what God wants them to be and do what God wants them to do. But if you have it in writing, they will be able to carry that the rest of their lives and say, this is how my parent really thinks about me. This is the love that is really there. This is the vision that they really have. And I think that you'll be surprised at the impact that will have.
Yeah, and you touched on something that is huge of before starting this process is to get into a state where I'm able to just be and to love. As cheesy as this sounds, I think his last name's Childre. He wrote a book, The Heart Math Solution. I love geeking out on that stuff, but basically the brain wave and the heart wave are different. And by doing a quick exercise where you go into your heart, it actually syncs up. By removing the judgment and focusing not necessarily on the behavior, but on your loved one, and just focusing on them and breathing through your heart, as weird as that sounds, literally judgment starts to melt away, and then we can come from this place of love in order to sit down and look at what that looks like. Because if I am coming from a place of judgment, it turns from we must do this together to you should be doing this.
Right.
So that's something
exactly.
that popped up.
Exactly. That's very true. And so we don't want to use your vision as a 2x4. So that's not something that we're going to beat them over the head. That is going to be how we see their success in life. And we want them to join that vision. I mean, imagine if unfortunately, this is a reality for a lot of us as parents, is we know that the next time we talk with them could be the last. That's just the reality of what we're really dealing with here. So what would you really want to tell your son or daughter? If that were the last moment that you had, what would you receive for them in their life? I can tell you so many clients say, you know what, my grandparents said before they died, I just want you to be clean and sober and have a good life. And that's why I'm getting sober today. I see that and I've heard it so many times. But if you can actually put that vision in writing, it's powerful. So those are my thoughts.
Absolutely. That was great. Thank you. I'm always learning from you. I appreciate it.
Okay, my pleasure.